No, folks, your eyes do not deceive you. The Puckleheads are back. Marcus White from the West Coast, Conall McNeilis from the East Coast, here to break down the happenings of the summer. Conall, it's been too long, I should say.
It has been a little while here, Marcus, but a little summer hiatus, hard at work. Went too fast always seems to does exactly that, but it was a fun summer. A pretty adventurous summer for the NHL, I would say so too. But most importantly, Marcus, how's your summer been so far?
Good. I've been on strike from this as long as Jaromir Jagr's been unsigned. But Jags gave me permission to break in solidarity with him. So the strike has ended, and we feel we're more effective advocating for change if this platform for all 7 listeners to affect change and have Jaromir Jagr get back in the NHL. How was your summer?
Good, busy, a lot of fun, some traveling. I went up to Portland, Maine, which was nice. I was up in Lake George, or Lake Shroon, technically, a little bit north of Lake George for my fantasy football draft last week. A lot of hockey, a lot of camps, a lot of private lessons, a lot of all sorts of stuff. So I'm excited for hockey to be back here, though, Marcus. Less than a month away from opening night, preseason next week, training camp around the corner. I was even watching the Traverse City Prospect Tournament last night because I'm just that desperate for hockey. So
I watched a few seconds of the Sharks Coyotes prospect stream, and then I was like, I'm good.
No.
I'll wait till
you're gonna get.
I was looking at some of the prospect rosters too. You're like, God, some of these teams are really scraping from the bottom of the barrel because so many of their prospects are already playing significant roles with the team. So that was interesting, but it was a good summer, an eventful summer. Lots of change in the world of hockey. Lots of people leaving familiar faces. In some cases, leaving very familiar faces and signing elsewhere, which I'm sure we'll get into. Discussing the elephant in the room, or the giant shark or giant maple leaf in the room, in my perspective. So yeah, let's get into it. We were talking a little bit about the show, about some teams. So, in traditional Puckleheads fashion, we're not going to group these teams in any way. We're just going to kind of talk about the teams that stood out to us this offseason. And I think you and I both agreed the team that stood out to us the most, a team that's playing in what's called the Research Triangle in Raleigh, the Carolina Hurricanes. You and I, we're some of those, smart hockey fans, where we've been on this bandwagon for a while. We've just been waiting for them to, have a goaltender, which, for those who don't know, is someone who stops the puck and keeps it out of the net. The Hurricanes have not had one in what seems like forever, but they've made some nice moves this offseason. They were active around the expansion draft and in free agency. Conall, what did you like about the Carolina offseason?
Everything the Hurricanes did this year was in a productive step forward, Marcus, and that includes some of the in-house stuff with the Jakub Slavin contract there. I mean, everything I've seen from them, I like. So we talk about goaltending. Scott Darling's going to get his chance to be the star goaltender there. We saw him take over pretty much starter roles in both playoff runs and when Corey Crawford was down with significant injury. Also bringing in a former face in Justin Williams on a very good contract there for 2 more years. Listen, great guy who's going to drive possession. Still a very productive player at 35. 2 years, $4.5 million. They could very much afford that. They then solidify the blue line even more so, bringing in Trevor Van Riemsdyk, who's still making only $825,000 on that contract. That's a fine guy to have as your 5th or 6th defenseman. Keep going forward with the Hurricanes here. Bring in Marcus Kruger. And then even a nice depth signing in Josh Jurish, who I saw a little bit with the Rangers, and actually had a nice year in Arizona, Marcus. They get rid of Verity Lack, unfortunately for Brian Bickle. Move on from Ryan Murray and a couple other guys. Marcus, this is the team that's been building. This is a team we've kind of kept an eye on. They made a little bit of a push even last year for a little while there. And most importantly, even Marcus, out of all this, they have $17 million in cap space today, which means inflation-wise, when it comes to the trade deadline, that's going to go through the roof. I have to look at the percentages there. They could be a team, blue line, Marcus, they can afford to give somebody up. They have all their draft picks. They can afford to give somebody up. They could make a huge splash come the trade deadline. And I'm serious, could turn themselves into a Stanley Cup contender overnight. That's how good this team could be.
So according to Cap Friendly, which are They don't even know about our program, but they're friends of the program. They're great. They've been helpful in many ways.
We love them so deep.
According to them, Carolina Hurricanes will have $80 million in salary cap space at the trade deadline.
They can trade for most teams' payroll if they wanted to, and they can take it on.
Right.
Yeah.
I really like the Trevor Van Riemsdyk acquisition too, and allowed them to make that Murray move. Stepniak's still hanging around in the NHL.
That's right. I forgot about Stepniak. Stepniak's such a good player.
Solid depth signing for them. Yeah, they're one of these. They're a team that I think a team like Edmonton kind of wishes they were. Edmonton does have Connor McDavid, but in terms of having value contracts that you're getting the most out of, I mean, Justin Falk might be signed to the best contract in the league. He's only making $4.8
for sure.
He's only making $4.833 million, even though NHL Network doesn't think he's a top 20 defenseman, which we can ignore. Jeff Skinner's deal looks like a steal at this point. I think there was some hesitation when he first signed it. He's signed at $6 million a year for at least the next 3 years. Actually, he signed for the next 6 years at $6 million a year. So he's 29 now. He'll be 30, 31, 32, 33. He'll be 34 when that deal ends. Like that's looking like a really, really good contract. And they just have the space to make these splashy type moves.
That's the biggest thing, Marcus. I mean, they have space. I mean, that Jordan Staal contract on a team that was cap shrunk, I mean, like you'd be a little hesitant, but listen, he's still putting up 45, 50 points a season.
Excuse me, I was mixing up the Staal contract with the Skinner contract. Skinner signed for
I figured that. I'm trying to segue that in.
I can't read. Cannot read. It's been an offseason.
That's fine.
Have you guys been trading in the offseason?
It's preseason, Marcus. We got to work out these kinks.
Like Averman in D2. I knew I forgot something.
That's fine. But listen, that Staal contract really isn't too bad. Skinner, 2 more years at 5.7. Victor Rask to a great contract, 5 more years at $4 million. They're young. They're going to be fast. They finally have some good goaltending in net, Marcus. And like we said, I mean, they could trade for the moon at the trade deadline if they wanted to, and they could probably get it. I mean, it's going to be a team that's going to be probably, in that third slot in the Metropolitan for most of the season, wild card third slot in that range. And then with the deadline, they could really take a slingshot up.
2 names I think they're going to be linked to if they aren't already. One they've already been linked to is Matt Duchene. Elliot Friedman wrote a little bit about that in 30 Thoughts this morning. He thought that Noah Hannafin's a guy that would get a Matt Duchene. If you're the Hurricanes, would you trade Noah Hannafin for Matt Duchene? Would that put them over the top?
I think you could afford to. I mean, you already got – listen, you got Slavin, who's 23. I mean, obviously Hannafin is a great player, but you're going to have to pay him soon. I mean, you have the space to do it, and it's one of those things your defensive crew, even the lower-end guys, are already going to be guys who can move the puck. You got a legit number 1 in Falk. Slavin looks like he's right there. And then you got other guys in Brett Pesce, who's going to have a nice deal, who's already 22, you already paid him. Under 20, 25 and under legit puck moving defensemen there already. 4 with Hannafin, and then a nice 5 and 6 in Klaus Dahlback and Trevor Van Riemsdyk. You got to move something to improve at the end of the day. And this is a team that's probably they're going to be a great possession team, Marcus, and they're probably not going to necessarily be the best scoring team in the league just because they don't have enough bite. Duchene gives you that, and at the end of the day, that's something you could afford to do. And then Marcus, if they want, they go get Hannafin for Duchene at the deadline. They trade a 2nd and a 3rd round pick and, lock up that blue line with a veteran defenseman there. It's nothing that they couldn't do. I think I would do that 9 times out of 10.
They do have most of their picks this year. They have 7. The only pick they don't have is a 5th round pick. I agree. That to me reeks of a Seth Jones for Ryan Johansson. It just makes too much sense for both parties involved type trade. Another name they haven't been linked to, and looking at their salary cap space, maybe one they should be linked to next summer. I mean, this is a young and up-and-coming enough team, and he would fit right in. Like, they've got to be calling John Tavares when he becomes a free agent next summer, right? Like this.
Oh, that's a team.
Like if he goes there, he puts them over the top, right?
Oh, I mean, and you know what? They could afford to give him a blank contract. They can say, here's a check. You write the numbers, and we can pay it. I mean, if he goes there and says, I want $12 million a year, they could be like, okay, no problem. And they could give him that contract, and they'd be absolutely still fine free agency-wise. Tavares has got to – listen, I know it's not your traditional hockey market, but we have seen, you know, when they have success, they do pretty well fan-wise. They do sell tickets to those games when they have success. They've been in a bit of a turmoil lately, haven't been selling a lot of tickets. But they're building. It's just, you know, I know the Sixers are trusting the process. Trust the process there in Carolina. They're in the right direction. Yeah, I mean, that is a team. Oh, man, John Tavares. I'm looking at the lineup of John Tavares right now. I mean, that would be absolutely lethal.
Everybody slots into a normal, you know, slots into their right spots. One of those guys like Kruger or Lindholm or, you know, some of these guys that are listed as centers probably move to the wing. But, man, if they signed him, I would say they'd be the favorite in the East. Just like knowing what that, like, they need someone that'll put them over the top offensively. I think Duchesne will help, and a deal for Hannafin would help a lot. But I think, you know, signing Tavares next summer, look, I know they're not the number one team in that market. It's tough when you have two top 5 college basketball teams in a basketball-loving area at any given time with Duke and North Carolina. And NC State has a loyal following of its own, even if they're not as good as Duke and Carolina. But if you bring in a guy like John Tavares, like, you know, I don't know if he's as marketable of a star as a Sidney Crosby or a Connor McDavid, but I would imagine that would help sell tickets.
I would too, and I think that's just something that's got to keep an eye on. And I keep saying, like, I know the Sedins just wrote that Tribune article saying they're not leaving, but, like, hell, they could both go to Carolina.
Yeah.
They have the space to acquire both of them if they wanted to. And imagine just throwing a veteran want a one-and-done run with those guys. They could go for it. And hell, Marcus, they have the space. If they didn't get Tavares, they could re-sign those guys too to lower-end deals over to the age of 35. And you know what? Both of them are still productive players. It's something to flirt with if you're Carolina.
You can run them with Stahl, maybe a sheltered third scoring line. You know, oh man, have Teravainen play with. That's an enticing. Of course, it's not going to happen, but that is enticing nonetheless. I didn't read that Players Tribune article today. Did they really say that they're not going to leave Vancouver at all?
I don't know if it's Players Tribune. I think they just talked about how they're from Vancouver. We love Vancouver, and you know we're always going to be Canucks. Blah blah blah. They pretty much said it all except saying we're never leaving. You know what I mean? Like it was one of those articles. So I don't think it's. I think actually might be. Can't blame either. They're both going to be in the Hall of Fame. They've had great careers. But if, you know, I think if you're a Vancouver fan, listen, I mean, realistically, if you're running that franchise, and I think you have to ask them to waive their no movement clauses. I think, listen, if they really cared and loved Vancouver enough, I think they'd be man enough, both of those guys who are both seem like pretty good individuals, to say, listen, we need to help the future of this franchise. We're not going to be able to get a prospect and some picks for you guys. To trade you, and then you could come back kind of thing. You know, I don't think that's out of the realm. I think Vancouver should trade them, and I hope they would help Vancouver and give back to them by allowing them to be traded.
I also think it's doing right by the Sedin situation. I mean, these guys have toiled the last few years on some awful Canucks teams and probably deserve one last go-round at the Cup. And, you know, they're not as good as they once were, but if the Carolina Hurricanes got the Sedins, like that – oh my! I mean, if they got the Sedins and Duchesne this year, oh my God, they're in the best position, I think, of any team in the league. I think they're the best positioned of any team in the league. Edmonton has McDavid, but we might touch on later. They have some awful contracts surrounding him. The Penguins have to finagle through salary cap concerns, as do the Washington Capitals. I think Carolina's in as good a position as any. And, you know, it's a team in a non-traditional market that had a splashy offseason, but not the only one, as the Dallas Stars also made quite a few white guy blinking gif moves this offseason that made you just go, you know, a little shocked there. Alex Radulov on his way to the Lone Star State. Ben Bishop also on his way to the Lone Star State, acquired in a pre-UFA day one deal and then re-signed with the Stars. Was that it? Did they bring in anyone else?
Martin Hansel as well.
That's right. Hansel's so hot right now.
Hansel's so hot right now. Lower end deals and Brian Flynn and Miro Heiskanen, and then of course Mark Mathod as well.
That's right.
From Ottawa.
Via Vegas.
I've liked the Stars for a few years, offense-wise, and their defense and goaltending has been a nightmare. I think once again, just like Carolina, Dallas has seemingly solidified their goaltending spot in Ben Bishop. I think that at least fills the gap for a few years here. They got Bishop. They gave him 6 years here. So, I mean, I'll bring him to age 36. Goalies tend to age a little bit better. Bishop went to a cup, of course, to the Lightning in 2014-15, had some injury issues, was traded to LA and then now to Dallas here. I think that's a great move for them. I mean, listen, their forward group is absolutely stacked. I mean, Jamie Benn and Spezza still there. Of course, Tyler Seguin. You're not throwing Radulov. Martin Hansel is probably going to be your third-line center, perhaps, depending on if you put Seguin on the wing or in the middle. You still got Rod Foska, who's a young guy coming up. Tyler Pitlick there. I like him. They're going to have a lethal group. They're going to score goals. Now it's up to Bishop in the defense. Defense, Marcus, much better. Obviously, still got John Klingberg, who we love. Danny Hamhuis there. Esa Lindell, who I did some tracking of the Stars a bunch this summer, and I've actually become a big fan of his. He's a nice young player. Mark Mathot, 2 years, $4.9 million. Top 4 guy, I guess. I'm not crazy about Mark Mathot, and he's not going to put you over the top on the blue line, but I think you bank on some younger guys there, and you got much better goaltending, hopefully, in Ben Bishop. And if you just score in bunches, Dallas is going for that 80s Oilers style, and they're really going for it this year.
I'm a little lower on Ben Bishop than I think some other people are. I think he's a good goalie, but it feels like them getting Niemi all over again. They're paying 2 goalies. I'm sure they're going to try and get rid of Lettinen, maybe buy him out. But if I and I'm pulling up the stats now, so pardon my filibustering here, but the difference between Niemi and Ben Bishop's even strength save percentage, and of course even strength save percentage is, you're controlling for things out of the goalie's control, and it's the best, in my opinion, one of the best measures of a goalie's ability. The difference between the two of them is not much. Niemi had a decent year in even strength last year. His save percentage was torpedoed on the penalty kill, just cratered on the penalty kill.
He was awful.
He was awful on the penalty kill. They were bad on the penalty kill. His even strength percentage was not great last year. He had a bad even strength save percentage, but his shorthanded save percentage was like .837. So that's just going to tank it even more. But career, he's a .923 at even strength. Career, Ben Bishop's a .925. Ben Bishop had a decent. He was a .922 with the Lightning, but then he was an .895 with the an .895 with the Kings. And I'm quickly doing the math here to see what the even strength save percentage was total. So nothing better than doing math on a live show. Doing the calculator, 928. .928 minus 71 divided by 928. Okay, so his even strength, I just did it wrong, and I'm not going to keep filibustering. So, in any way, there's a 0.2% difference in their even strength save percentages for their careers.
Yeah.
That, to me, doesn't scream an immediate upgrade. I know Niemi's been reviled for how he played in Dallas, but, in 15-16, he was not bad at even strength. Again, they were just awful shorthanded, and that cratered his save percentage. So I don't think that is as big of an upgrade as people are making it out to be. I think Bishop's almost like a Martin Jones type goalie, firmly in the middle of the league, can go above that on a given day, can go below that. But that's what I thought Niemi was before they got him too. I thought that was interesting. I agree with you on their defense. It just feels like they're older and slower. I like Mathot, but
if Heiskanen could crack the lineup as an 18-year-old, I mean, that'd be a great get. But I mean, still, he's a young guy. They do have Julius Honka also there in the minors. it depends on who cracks their lineup. I still don't think their defense is that improved. I think they're going to be a better team. I think they'll probably make the playoffs as well. Last year they were just riddled by injuries. They're going to score a lot. They definitely have a ton of depth up front. Really would have liked to have seen maybe even, the money they invested in, say, a Martin Hansel maybe, and maybe put that towards the blue line. I think that would have been a smarter investment. But maybe they're banking on Heskin and just cracking a lineup as an 18-year-old.
And they certainly have a good forward group, as we said, and it feels like they're kind of going back towards that 2015-16 Stars team that was just loaded offensively, couldn't defend worth a lick, but was just loaded up front. And as you said, they are loaded up front. And I think the Ken Hitchcock hire was a really smart move. I think he's a really, really good coach. Probably shouldn't have been fired in St. Louis. I don't think Mike Yeo is an upgrade over him. I think he's a better coach than Mike Yeo. But and I think that's going to help a lot. They're going to have better coaching. I think Lindy Ruff did his job to get them to that step to where they are, but I think Hitchcock can put them over the top. But yeah, I agree. I like them to go back to the playoffs, and I think it looks to me it looks like right now that the Central Division is a 5-team playoff division again.
Yeah, I would agree with that statement for sure. Yeah, Dallas, a lot of movement for Dallas this year. We'll see if that winds up being a good thing here in the long run here. As we move on here for other off seasons, Marcus, maybe a sore subject for you. The Toronto Maple Leafs having a fairly active off season here, of course, signing Shark legend and career Shark Patrick Marleau, Dominic Moore to fill in maybe the Brian Boyle role as a fourth-line center. Ron Hainsey to help out with that blue line. I like that too. But Marcus, the big get is Patrick Marleau. What are your thoughts on – we can almost dual affect this, how it's going to affect the Sharks in the long run and how it's going to affect Toronto here in the next season or so?
So let me be on the record that I predicted Patrick Marleau would sign with the Toronto Maple Leafs. I wrote on Fear the Fin before free agency that he would sign with Toronto. I said he'd sign a 2-year, $12 million deal. He signed, I believe, a 3-year, $18.75 million deal. So I was only off by $0.25 million annually and another year. I'm going to stick that as a feather in the cap. I think it's a really good signing for them. I don't think he's the same Patrick Marleau that Mike Babcock fell in love with at the 2010 and 2014 Winter Olympics. However, I think it's similar to, what you're seeing from Carolina in that they're striking while the iron's hot, while they have cap space, and while these guys are on value deals, they can afford to pay Marleau a little more than maybe he's worth. And I think he's going to help that lineup. I mean, the guy scored 20 goals at even strength last year, 7 on the power play, 27 total. Yes, he's 38, but he can still skate. He's not a great driver of possession on his own. He's more of I don't want to say a passenger at this point, but his possession numbers were good with good possession players. When he was asked to carry a line, it wasn't. And I think the Maple Leafs realized that he's not going to carry a line. I think he'll be a great fit alongside Kadri or Matthews. I really, really like the signing for the Maple Leafs. I think, with a team like the Maple Leafs, you got to just figure, okay, they're rich. They're going to figure out a way to deal with that third year, whether that's, because it's most of the money's in bonuses, whether or not they trade him and he retires and does the David Clarkson type thing, or they send him to Robidaw Island. They're gonna do something with the third year of that contract. Yeah, I really like that signing for the Leafs. I still think they're missing a defenseman, but I think they did just enough, and the rest of the contenders in the East just got bad enough where, I like their chances in that division. I like them to get – I think they've got a really good shot at a conference final. And then if they get another defenseman, I think they go from, possible conference finalists to possible Stanley Cup finalists.
Yeah, I would agree with that statement. Marcus, looking at the Leafs going forward – Van Riemsdyk, Bozak, Komarov, all UFAs after this year. One, if not maybe 2 of those guys you're going to have to part with when you look at the money you're going to have to invest in down the road.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you think they make a move? Do you think they move one of those guys at the deadline, or do they maybe trade for another defenseman, giving up probably maybe a prospect or a pick instead, one of those guys, and go for it this year? Or do you think they're still long-term invested there?
I think Bozak and Komarov. I mean, I hadn't watched the Leafs much last year, so I can't speak to Komarov or Bozak or Van Riemsdyk's play too well, but I feel like they probably value Van Riemsdyk the most. In his 31 Thoughts, it's called 31 Thoughts now because there's 31 NHL teams because Vegas exists. Elliot Friedman wrote that it seems like that the Leafs want to get something done with James Van Riemsdyk. I've never thought Bozak was that good, so I feel like they're going to have no problem letting him walk and replacing him internally. Komarov.
Bozak for Nick Holden. What? Who said it?
Nick Holden's still a Ranger?
Oh, unbelievably, yes.
We'll get to that.
He's going to wind up playing. It's going to be Shaq. God, they're not even going to put Shattenkirk in the top pairing. Oh, God.
We're going to get to that. We'll get to that. Yeah, no, I think, maybe you try moving a JVR and saying for a defenseman and then saying, all right, Kasperi Kapanen, like your time's now. Like, but I think they also might move Kapanen. I think they've got a lot of flexibility, though. I think they're going to have to do something on the blue line. I like Jake Gardner. I like Morgan Riley. I don't like what's his name? They re-signed.
About the Zaitsev signing.
I was about to say it's not. I'm not like a typical white hockey coverer who just doesn't like Russian players. I don't think he's worth what they gave him.
He's not a bad player. I think he's fine, but like he got 6 years and 7 years, right. $4.5 million. Like that is, and that's a big investment to a guy. $4.5 million for him. Money that should have been saved up for somebody else. I mean, if you want to give him, that's money that could wind up hurting them down the line.
And that's what I don't think the Marlowe deal is the deal that's going to hurt them down the line. I think it's the deals like the Zaitsev deal. It's the deals like let me pull up the cap
contract.
Right. It's those deals that are going to, because, as bad as Marlowe might be as he gets older, he's found a way to fight off Father Time. That deal is going to kill them, I think. Yeah, God, Matt Martin is signed for how long? Oh my God. I mean, that's
3 more years.
If they didn't, that's $7 million they'd have on hand, and that would go a long way towards paying Austin Matthews, William Nylander, Mitchell Marner. So yeah, I like what the Leafs did though on the whole this summer. I think they had a good summer, and I think they're going to be. I think they're going to be a really good team, but I think it might be tough for them in that division because one of their original 6 rivals, the Montreal Canadiens, we've seemingly ripped them every time we've spoken about them over the last 2 or 3 years, and rightfully so because they've been pretty incompetently managed. But you got to give credit where it's due. I think they had a pretty good offseason this summer. They brought in Jonathan Drouin. They got David Schlemko for pennies on the dollar. I'm a big David Schlemko fan. I think he's incredibly underrated.
I thought that was a nice catch for them.
Skater, going to move the puck. He's going to help their power play a lot. The Carl Alsner deal, I didn't love. The money's not terrible, but I'm always wary of paying guys who have a shutdown defenseman rep into their 30s because those guys just typically don't age well.
They just unfortunately, those guys, and I think Carl Alsner is still going to be a decent player for the next 2 years, Marcus, but they just seem to fall off a cliff, those kind of guys. Naturally, when I think of Dan Girardi, who for a long time was probably underrated for the first 6 years of his career, maybe, and then he immediately became overrated once they decided, probably even before they paid him, but that's another conversation for another day. I like Montreal too, Marcus. I mean, the Jonathan Drouin he is 22 years old, and he is going to only get better. That contract's going to do dividends to them. They got Thomas Mechanic for 1 year. His contract's coming up, actually, so it's a nice timing there. They have some money for next offseason, too. They still have $8 million of cap space. They can make a nice trade at the deadline. I like Schlemko. Obviously, Weber, another year or two of him will probably be in a top guy, but, still not a huge fan of the Jeff Petrie deal that's there. But they bring in Mark Streit for $700,000. Jordy Ben there as well. They can have him from the trade deadline last year. I like Montreal. I do. And obviously, you got Carey Price, who is aging, and he's going to have that massive contract going into his 30s. Montreal on the whole, I think they improve here. And they make some nice little depth signings there. I also love Alex Hemsky there. Always been a fan of him. If he's playing on your second or third line wing, he's going to be a guy who could put in 40 points as maybe a top 9 guy, if you will, not necessarily a top 6. Your first or second power play units. And Marcus, in today's NHL, frankly, it's, you don't want to overpay for a guy, but for a guy who's only making $1 million this year, he's fantastic in the shootout too. That's a guy who you make a break by a few points, so shootout wins that could help him. He's going to be a guy who's in your top 3 every time.
That's a guy that's probably worth at least three or four times, perhaps even 5 times what he's getting paid this season.
I would easily give Alex Hemsky $3.5–4 million for sure.
Yeah. Give him the Justin Williams deal, frankly.
Exactly. It's a little bit different. Justin Williams probably a little more reliable defensively, but Alex Hemsky still puts up points. I've always been a fan of Alex Hemsky. He gets the job done. He's gonna have a great roller hockey player. He played in the Czech. He played for the Czech championship team in 2013 or something. Yeah. God,
can you imagine being in that tournament that you're like, oh, I get to line up across NHLer Alex Hemsky. This will be fun.
Probably just freaking everybody.
We talked about Alzner aging, and I unfortunately accidentally skipped over. You mentioned discussing the other side of the Marleau signing, so I figured Alzner's a good transition to go back to what the Sharks did this summer. In addition to letting Marleau go, they also re-signed Marc-Edouard Vlasic to an 8-year deal that comes into effect next year, to a 6-year deal that comes into effect next year. And boy, do I hate that Marc-Edouard Vlasic deal. I don't hate it, meaning that I don't think, I'm not one of those guys who's like, oh man, these players are overpaid. Like, they're making so much money to pay a game. No. One guy signed under the new CBA to an 8-year deal that's a defenseman who was over 30 when he signed it, and that was Brent Seabrook. Two of those guys signed in Brent Burns and Marc-Edouard Vlasic. Service to, this is the going rate now. I don't really think that it is. Seeing some of the deals that were signed, seeing what Carl Alzner signed for, they did not give these guys hometown discounts. They gave them $8 million, 8-year deals, third time's a charm, at top dollar. I think I don't hate the Jones deal because, he's basically getting Marc-Andre Fleury money and comparable goaltenders. That's the going rate. I'm fine with that. But man, these Vlasic and Burns deals, especially for a team that, Joe Thornton's 38 years old, coming off significant knee surgery. Yes, they have some promising young players, but barring them signing John Tavares in free agency, why would you? I just don't get why you'd give I don't see it ending well. I see this becoming this is well on its way to becoming a Detroit or Vancouver situation where you have your core guys locked up and that core is just not good enough. Is there any way this ends well? I can't see it.
No, I don't see it. It's a bad contract. Another guy, Vlasic, who's had that reputation as a good shutdown guy, and he's been for probably the past 5 or 6 years, a little bit of a drop off this past year.
And some of that was usage. Tyler Dello wrote about that on The Athletic. Pete DeBoer absolutely hammered him with tough assignments, and sheltered the rest of the defense group. But if he can't handle that, don't play him in that role. If he can't handle it, he's not worth that money.
I agree. I couldn't agree more. And it's just, thankfully the Sharks, at least they do have cap space. And obviously Joe Thornton's, almost done here. Joe Ward's contract's almost done. There's some contracts coming up. But it's on a sense, Marcus, for a guy on the wrong age of 30 now into that contract. I know you want to reward guys, but I always quote, and he got a lot of flack for his time with the U.S. national team, but I always think about the Jurgen Klinsmann quote from a few years back. You pay players for what they've done, not what they're going to do, which is the much smarter decision, which is his logic for not having Landon Donovan on the 2014 team, which is another debate. But at the same time, and overall, in an Olympic or World Cup setting, a franchise setting. I couldn't agree more with that statement.
Absolutely.
And I think this Vlasic deal is for some tough years and helping them get to a Stanley Cup and being a great player on a great contract. But you know what? It's a business. And if you are able to get a guy for below market value, what do, Marcus? You sell high if you can. And I'm not saying Vlasic, you want Vlasic with the team, but for that much money, an issue down the line, you hope it is, and they got some space. But it's just didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. It really didn't.
Yeah, I just saw the years are what kills. $7 million, fine. That's the going rate. But I'd have been fine, $7 million for 5 years at like a $35 million, especially seeing what guys signed for in UFA on the same day. A guy like Carl Alsner, he didn't get a 7-year deal. He got like a 5 or a 6. Like Kevin Shattenkirk got like a 4 or 5 year deal.
Yeah. If Vlasic got 4 years, $7 million a year, you'd be like, all right, or even 5 years.
Right.
Like you could probably live with 5 years.
Yeah.
Load it up front, so the money is given some bonuses. So that way the actual salary is only $2 million that last year, and then maybe you could flip them for somebody who needs them at the deadline. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's something you could live with, but doesn't make a whole lot of sense, especially when you look around the league here, Marcus.
And the problem, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. The problem is you're not getting value around these guys for much longer. You need the value around those guys in years 6 through 8 of the contract, not necessarily years 1 through 5. And in years 6 through 8, the way it's shaping up, Hertl needs to get paid next summer. Timo Meyer's going to need to get paid the summer after that. Same with Kevin LeBanc. Like the guys that are going to form the new young core, they're going to have to get paid more. I agree. I think the Klinsmann quote is apt here about, paying players for what they've done. And, in some ways, I'm just as worried about that Burns deal, man. He's already 32. He's going to be making $8 million a year. Like, I think he's got maybe 3 or 4 years at this level at most.
Yeah.
4 or 5 years beyond that. It's just, it's not prudent. This reeks of, this is not going to end well. It's not going to end well. It's going to be a Detroit situation.
Yeah, exactly. It's tough right now. They got some time, but you would hope there would be more rationale into the future rather than paying for the past dividends you've seen with this team. Especially when you think about it, the past is probably what's they're only holding on to as they go towards the future there in San Jose.
Now, if they sign John Tavares, I'm all okay with it. If they sign John Tavares next summer, I'm like, oh, this is great. They're great.
Things change. Things change when you get a guy like John Tavares, that's for sure. Speaking of John Tavares, his team was made a trade with this team here as we move on to the Edmonton Oilers. Who that segue? Look at that on the fly. You can't teach that stuff. That's just talent. You move forward to the Oilers, of course, trading Jordan Eberle to the New York Islanders. Ryan Strome and UC Jokinen coming in there to Edmonton. We're a fairly active team as far as reshaping some of their salary cap situation. They do have $8 million. And, of course, Marcus, without that massive Connor McDavid extension, 8 years, 12.5 years. Apparently it was bigger, and McDavid said it was something more like 13.25 were the initial reports. McDavid took one for the team and knocked it down. He wasn't comfortable with it. Because
the ownership group that's getting an arena paid for by the taxpayers of Edmonton, Alberta needs Connor McDavid to, they don't have the money to pay. Got it. Yeah, got it.
Yeah, exactly.
I love the Draisaitl deal. Let's start there. I love that deal. People hated on it. You gotta pay these young guys. You gotta pay these young guys. And for what he could be, that's fine. That's the going rate. The cap's gonna go up. I'd much rather pay a young guy $8.5 million than pay, say, a Brent Burns $8 million for 8 years. This is a fine deal, the Draisaitl deal.
Yeah, I'm fine with the Draisaitl deal. I think that probably sets the standards for some other guys. I think Jack Eichel's probably looking at that Draisaitl deal, Marcus, coming in next year.
Eichel maybe in his eyes.
Lit up there in Buffalo. Where's Gordy and Chris Carr when you need them? So, I mean, they bring in Ryan Strome. You probably get worse with Ryan Strome there compared to Jordan Eberle. But this is the effects when you make poor captains elsewhere when you give Milan Lucic $6 million a year and you sign Chris Russell to 4 years at $4 million a year. Marcus, this is a team that they better freaking win now because they could be in so much trouble in 2 years, and you're going to waste Connor McDavid here. Now, if there's anything to say about Edmonton, they got about 8.3 in cap space now. That should project up. I mean, if Carolina is going to get $18 million, I mean, they should be able to take on, a significant chunk of money here.
$40 million at the deadline.
Okay, I would have guessed around 30-ish. So there you go, $40 million around the deadline. They could take on some serious money to really go for it this year. Cam Talbot's still on a good deal there. Mine is I'm not really sure what to make of their blue line. Their forward group is a little more than but they shell out $2 big contracts to two guys who are deserving of those contracts, Marcus. What do they do around them here? What do you think is the approach now going forward into the season, or does Edmonton even have an approach? They're just like, screw it, whatever.
I mean, build a time machine and not trade Taylor Hall for Adam Larson. I think that would be my first step, and then not trade Jordan Eberle for Ryan Strome. Here's the thing with Edmonton. Ryan Strome's not bad. Adam Larson, not bad. You got to be getting more for these guys than what you're getting, man. Like,
that's the problem. It's who you're giving up for these guys, right? Yeah. I mean, it just doesn't. You would have at least figured if they got, Ryan Strome and a second and a third round pick, I'd be like, all right, at least they're like getting a little bit more value here or something like. But no, just like, here you go. Here's Jordan Eberle.
I don't want a Monday morning quarterback them, but it's hard to think that. And who knows if he would have gone there. I'd imagine they would have had a much easier time trying to sell him on it. But, let's say they didn't trade Taylor Hall for Adam Larson this past year, and they didn't trade Strome for Eberle, and they didn't sign Milan Lucic, so they had the space. And then instead of that, they were like, hey, what if we sign, Kevin Shattenkirk in free agency, or we trade for we trade Taylor Hall for Kevin Shattenkirk at the trade deadline or before the season. He might not stay, but if you trade for him before the year, you can at least sell him on it. And I don't know. If I was them, even knowing he could have walked, I would have rather traded Taylor Hall for Kevin Shattenkirk, because worst case, you would have gotten salary cap flexibility. You would have had space. You could have signed someone. Now they can't do that because they are paying Chris Russell and Milan Lucic a combined $10 million. Yes, folks, a full 1/7 of their salary cap is going to guys that could best be described as over the hill. UC Jokinen deal, that's a guy who continues to be undervalued.
I'm a big UC Jokinen fan, so I've always been a fan of his. I like that contract.
Cassian deal, not terrible. But they're going to have to pay some of these guys. Pat Maroon is not going to be making 1.5 next year when McDavid comes on the books. Puljujarvi's deal is going to be off the books in a couple of years. The good news is, they did some stuff in the draft. Kyler Yamamoto was a really good pick. They're going to have some high upside guys that can potentially slide onto McDavid's wing at a really cheap price. This is their window though. This is the year, I think. I think it's this year or bust, because I just look at some of these big.
I really kind of feel the same way, and I know people it's hard to pick. I think Connor McDavid will just keep them in the playoff hunt for most of his career, but they're not going to be a legit team. And you have these contracts of aging guys. It is so frustrating. Like Edmonton, get handed talent after talent after talent year after year and fail to properly build around them. And it starts with management, obviously, and they bring in different coaches and they fire different coaches and all this crap, and they get gifted generation. And if they waste this talent, I mean, listen, hey, he signs an 8-year contract. He's only going to be 21. He'll be 29 when he's a free agent. He'll still be very valuable. He could be walking out of there by that time. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, it's hard to project down the back end of that deal, but in the immediate future, I mean, that's the other thing too. Chris Russell's got a no move. Milan Lucic also has a no move. I'll say it. Peter Chiarelli is not a very good general manager. Like, his teams win in spite of him. Like, he did not manage the Boston Bruins well. You look at the number of elite players that like they could have had conceivably one of Phil Kessel or Tyler Seguin. They could also have Blake Wheeler. They could also have Dougie Hamilton on that Bruins team right now. If they were on that Bruins team, in addition to Pastrnak, Marchand, all those guys, I don't know if, Pastrnak was acquired for picks they got with Blake Wheeler or whatever. So pardon my ignorance, but that might be the best team in the NHL with that forward group, with Wheeler, Seguin, Marchand, Bergeron, and Pastrnak. I don't think there's any, and you could put me in the top 6, and that's the best top 6 in the league. You know what I mean? Like that 6th forward spot. But Chiarelli, that's the reason he got canned in Boston, and now it's the same thing. And he's just so willing to give up on talented guys. I see them being Boston West. I think their window's going to shut. This is the year, maybe you go all in and you bring in John Tavares at the trade deadline, which would be like nuts. And I think if Tavares doesn't give them an indication he wants to stay, and, given the issues they have with Puljujarvi, they just drafted, if you give up Puljujarvi, a first-round pick and maybe a prospect for John Tavares at the trade deadline, yeah, you do that if you're Edmonton and you go all in this year, because beyond this year, man, it looks really tough. I just can't see them. Pacific's wide open. Like, yeah, the Ducks made it to the conference final, but I don't think they're very good. I don't think Randy Carlyle is a great coach. Like, I don't think they're a good team. The Pacific's wide open. The West is wide open. But, if they win, they're going to win in spite of themselves.
Yeah, usually is the case with those guys. Sorry, I'm just acquiring my charger here, so I don't.
Yes, you got to stay charged. I'll filibuster while you grab your charger and just
rant about
the incompetence of the Oilers. I mean, I think you can make the argument they're the most poorly run franchise in the NHL.
Oh, I don't even think it's a debate, frankly. They're just terrible. I don't get them. 2 big contracts to guys who deserve the contracts, Marcus. They better hope they make a move this year. They got their draft picks. I think they could probably make a move for somebody at the deadline, try to bolster that blue line a little bit. But they better hope they got a chance, but they got to hope it's this year. Otherwise, they could be in some serious trouble here, Marcus, as we go down the line with them.
Yeah, I am not high on the Oilers moving forward. Another team I'm not high on, that we were high on, and this will give us an opportunity to rant about more things, the Florida Panthers. The strangest offseason in the NHL this year. And by the strangest, I mean, they were linked to trading Jonathan Marchessault and Riley Smith are both in Las Vegas. And those are two of the better contracts on their team, and they're just gone. They did sign Radim Vrbata to a pretty cheap deal. But, man, they're not going to be good. They're just, they're not going to be good.
They lose substantial scoring depth in Marchessault and Jagr, which we'll get into after this. Their blue line.
And Smith.
Yeah, and Ben Smith, gosh. They still, as much as we love Bobby Lou, they got an aging Roberto Luongo for 5 more years on the books. They have James Reimer, so they have a decent enough goaltending duo, but you're not really sure what's going on there. Their blue line is, like you said, they're even flirting with trading Demers. They don't really have much of a blue line after him. I mean, Yandel and Ekblad there, and Ekblad's had all these injuries. You're starting to get a little nervous about where his career could go. Their forward group loses depth. This is a team, Marcus, that is, notoriously what we would call a budget team, not a cap team, and that they're not going to be spending to the cap every year. And they had contracts that they literally just let go. It doesn't make sense. The Marchessault leaving him exposed was one of the dumbest moves I've ever seen. I mean, especially with the expansion. You wonder where this direction this team is going. They gave Michael Haley 2 years. I mean, come on. This team, they give up on all the analytics things after 2 months of not working. That was mostly just the issues with excessive injuries and all sorts of stuff. I don't know what the Florida Panthers are doing. They are not going to be good this year. That is a guarantee. They will not be a good hockey team this year. And they still need to fill out this roster, Marcus. I mean, realistically, they only got about 10 forwards and 6 defensemen. I mean, I guess they're hoping for some of the younger guys to come in and play. I don't know if I see it, Marcus. I don't know what their plan is. This is a team that has no idea what they're doing right now. And that is the worst place you want to be in the world. Delusional, frankly. That's the worst place you want to be in the world. You either want to be a very good team or you need to know that you are not a good team at all and accept that fact for a 3 to 4 year window, depending on how long it takes to rebuild. This team decided to buy into the analytics stuff for literally a couple months and panicked.
That's it. Literally a couple months.
Literally blew it all up, and you let go possession driving guys and Jagr and point scoring guys like in March's show, and their blue line is not that good. I don't know. I don't know what the hell they're doing, and they could be in some serious trouble.
I mean, the questionable thing for me was, you look at this team, and I'm thinking, okay, this is a 7-3-1 team at the expansion draft. This is a team that's going to protect 7 forwards.
Yeah, they're going to protect 7 forwards for this team.
And they protected 4 forwards and 4 defensemen, so they could protect Petrovic and Mark Pysyk. They left, I believe they left Demers exposed, which is just, or did they leave Yandel exposed? They left one of the two, which is just like, I mean, you look at their top 3 and you're like, okay, this is a solid top 3. Their bottom 3 isn't great on defense, but that's certainly good enough for the playoffs. And then you think about what they had last year. And you're like, okay, if that team had stayed healthy, they're probably in the playoffs. They're probably in the playoffs, given the young talent up top. But instead, they bring in Bob Bugner, who's the former Sharks assistant coach, which I guarantee you is why Michael Haley has a job. And he's also not making league minimum. He's still making less than $1 million a year. But they got Brandon Peary out of PTO, which we love Brandon Peary. That's always a smart move.
Still a big Brandon Peary fan.
It's a smart move to do that. It's a team without direction, a team without purpose that is, 2 years ago, we were talking about them like we were talking about Carolina. We were talking about them as an up-and-coming team on the rise. I remember when they got Luongo at the deadline. You and I were like, this is a team that's primed to be, in contention for years to come. And now they just pissed it all away. It's really rather remarkable. And it all seems to be overpower dynamics because Dale Talon got his role reduced and now he's back. So he's like, we're just going to swing the opposite way and prove that I have no idea how to build a team other than that time in Chicago almost 10 years ago.
Yeah, it's really just it's upsetting to see what Florida's doing because I really thought there's a promise there, and you want to see hockey in the Sunshine State there succeed. They already have attendance issues. That's going to be an issue for them going down the line. Just not happy with what they've just done there. I mean, we talked a couple of the PTOs we like, but it's not really a good move. But a guy who doesn't even have a PTO or a contract.
Oh, my God.
Marcus is the one, the only, Jaromir Jagr. How this guy, Marcus, isn't signed. I mean, what was he, second on their team in scoring last year? I mean, this guy continues to be the 8th wonder of the world, and he somehow doesn't have a contract. And when you think about the contracts, there were some of these the guys being signed this year, Marcus, and we just talked about freaking Michael Haley getting a contract, and Jaromir Jagr doesn't have a contract. I mean, what bizarro world are we living in? First off, Marcus, I'll let you rant as well. And I think I want you to give me your expert opinion on where you think he'll go. By the way, 46 points last year with the Florida Panthers, in case anybody was curious.
Yeah, I think the thing with Jagr is I think there's definitely a little bit of he's being a little picky with his destination, and he wants to go to a contender, and he wants to get a chance to win a Stanley Cup. But the guy scored 46 points last year. You're telling me that a team could not use a guy like Jaromir Jagr in his top 9? Oh, he's old. He can't keep up with the game. BS. He just had 46 points last year. He was a possession driver again. Like, look, the guy's good enough to get a job. I don't know if he wanted to go to a place like Pittsburgh, but that's given what they lost this, offseason. That really seemed like it would have been a good fit. Maybe it's the money too. Maybe he wants a little more money. Fine. There's got to be contenders that could use him. Carolina could use him.
Every team in the league could essentially use this guy.
Yes.
$3 to $4 million, mostly in bonuses. Could play on be your third line right wing. Could play on the power play. Is going to help the development of your younger players. It just makes sense on every aspect of it. And for him to just not have a contract is asinine to me. I mean, like I said, granted, he dropped off, 20 points. Oh, I'm sorry. The guy's freaking 44. I guess he's not allowed to.
That was also, he had a sky-high shooting percentage the year before, and he regressed. His PDO came down.
Well for him. I mean, he's still a very, very good hockey player. Any team in the league who wants to contend should be signing Jaromir Jagr. I want him to go to the Rangers. Carolina could use him. Pittsburgh could have used him. I think Nashville could use him.
Yes.
I think that would make – Nashville's a team who is very deep and I think is good, but is going to have a real problem putting the puck in the net this season. I think their blue line's legit. I think their goaltending, that's debate. I think Sarl's going to have more of a role this year. They have the space to do it.
They got $6 million in cap space.
Listening, that would make too much sense in a 1-year contract. They got they were smart. They made a nice signing in Scott Hartnell, which I like this season. I think he would be a perfect fit for there. Could help with your goal scoring. They have a ton of speed to begin with. You don't need another speedster on that team. He would be an ideal scenario. Every team in the league could use scoring punch. A guy who could play top 9 minutes. He'll give you 15 to 17 minutes a night. I think he averaged 17 minutes last season, somewhere in that range. And he'll play in your second power play unit, and he's still going to put pucks in the net. 17 minutes exactly. Wow, that's pretty good.
Montreal could use him. Heck, Edmonton could use him, which we talked about.
Cool.
Columbus could use him.
No, he's not going to go play.
Sharks. He's not playing with Torts. Although he's got the work ethic, I think he could. I mean, the guy's a gym.
That'd be one of the guys that Torts would probably let slide. Like, there's a few you got to do it with.
And the Sharks have space. I wrote about that they should sign him. People are like, oh, they need to get younger. I'm like, oh, 1-year deal. Like, that's the worst thing in the world.
He was still.
Yeah, every team.
I'm laughing. He was still a 55.4% relative Corsi last year.
He's good.
Corsi 4. It's stupid. Yeah, it's amazing to me. And
he's a good player.
He's
a good player. You put him on your first. You put him on your top power play. You put him on your third line. It's not that hard. It's really not that hard.
I want Younger on the Rangers so badly. Oh my god, that would be
You mentioned your Rangers. I think we got to give them before we get into some more interesting comp. We should give your Rangers a quick mention. What you think of their offseason?
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna just have a timer and just let you go off. How does 2 minutes sound?
2 minutes. I can do it in 2 minutes. All right.
Let me get the stopwatch ready. Fans of the long listening fans of the program know that
I don't want to pull anything.
We've given Conall, minutes at a time to rant each show, and it's slowly increasing. So, coming off the off season, it's not a huge increase, but I got my stopwatch ready. Are you ready, Conall? You got 2 minutes to give us the skinny on the Rangers off season, including all thoughts that come to mind. Sure. Ready?
All right, let's start with the positives here, okay? Most importantly, they bought out Dan Girardi, which is, addition by subtraction. Getting rid of Dan Girardi off your top pairing, your top four even, is almost like adding a top four defenseman without even doing anything. That's how bad Dan Girardi was at the end of his career. Then you go out and make a trade, which I actually didn't think they had the balls to do, and trading Derek Stepan. 55-point guys don't roll on trees, but they still want to get younger and faster. I get it. They get a first-round pick in Elias Anderson. They get another young right-handed puck-moving defenseman, Anthony DeAngelo, who he can skate, man. I did some tracking of Phoenix this year. Overall, like they moved. They now wind up with 2 first-round picks. They haven't had a first-round pick in 4 years, so they woke up there. They lose depth at center also with Oscar Lindberg. I would have rather have lost either Michael Grabner or Jesper Fast, 2 wingers. I think Lindberg is a great fourth-line center. They replace him with David Desjardins. They probably still need a center, but if they save up, they have about $3 million or so at the cap. They could almost take in close to $10 million at the deadline. Looking at you, Joe Thornton. Anyway, going forward, obviously the big one, Kevin Shattenkirk. They bring in him 4 years, $6.65 a year is great, but now we go to the negatives. Mark Stahl is still in the roster, and Nick Holden is still on the roster. Okay, And I don't trust AV as far as I can throw him. I have no clue who he's going to put in the top 4. If it's Shattenkirk, McDonough, and then Shea and Smith, who would turn out to be a great pairing, that'd be fine. But that still leaves a dumpster fire on your third pairing in Mark Stahl and Nick Colden. I mean, if they play 2 minutes a night, that'd be great. But it doesn't even matter. They have a bunch of young defensemen. D'Angelo better make this roster. They have Neil Pionk, and he's playing here. They have a ton of young guys who could possibly make the – Sean Day can make the roster. There's a ton of guys who could make this roster. Oh, Alexei Brzegeslov from the KHL, who should be on the roster. And he's an opt-out clause. If he doesn't play in the NHL, if they don't put him on the roster, I'm going to freaking kill somebody. Nick Holden needs to be traded. Mark Stahl should have also been bought out. They're probably going to buy out Stahl next summer. It better be done. Give me another center. I either want Bozak or Thornton or the Sedins.
You're good.
Okay.
I gave you an extra 15, but you earned it. You earned it with that performance. That was good. That's a good offseason. I think Thornton could be a fit for them at the deadline if he's willing to waive. I think that'd be an interesting for the Rangers. Is there anyone we didn't touch on from this offseason before we get to this fun little topic?
Yeah, we got a fun topic next. Just some teams who had a good – we talked about the draft a little bit. I mean, I think the Flyers are going to be better. I think Calgary's blue line might be the best in the NHL, but then their goaltending is going to be a crapshoot. I mean, that's awful. So it's hopefully that they have the puck all the time. It's like, what the heck's going to happen? Talked about Phoenix there. I guess Phoenix gets better getting Antti Ranta and Derek Stepan.
I was going to say I think Arizona had a really good offseason.
A nice offseason. I think they had enough prospects they could afford to give up that first-round pick. But other than that, Marcus, I think, a lot of PTOs have been given out. We talked about, P.A. Parenteau before the show, a guy like that, Daniel Winnick, other guys who could possibly fit in there. I think a lot of teams are more open to that nowadays, and I think at least a couple of those guys will find rosters towards the end of the season. But, starting it now, if Jagr is not signed by an NHL team beforehand, before some of those guys, I think that's an issue in its own right. But as we move on here, Marcus, a little fun to end the show. Our good friend of the show, Danny Cuneo, out there in Los Angeles doing well, put out a great tweet yesterday, which we were both very enticed by. He said if you could replace the dollar bills in the United States, so the 1, the 5, the 10, the 20, the 50, and 100, so that is 6 players, with American-born athletes, who would you put on? So we came in, Babe Ruth came up, Jesse Owens, modern-day Michael Phelps, Serena Williams, talked about, all these guys mixed in, Muhammad Ali, some boxers mixed in there. So we thought it'd be fun to give out 6 guys who would go in each of the bills here. And so 6 players, not necessarily the best players, and not necessarily just guys necessarily old or new, just kind of things we think their longevity and their impact on the league. I think that's more of there, Marcus. Marcus,
here is this NHL.
I say we're keeping it to NHL.
What about North American hockey?
Are you gonna? I see. I only did players. I didn't do any coaching.
Because you gotta go on the 100. You can't do a player because Franklin wasn't a president and he's on the dollar. You gotta go.
Fine. I'll change it. So the $100 bill has got to be a coach.
But I'm saying, can we open it up to women's hockey players?
Yeah, sure. I'm
okay.
a progressive human being. Sure.
Cool. Let's do it.
All right, $1 bill. I tried to make comparisons on each of the bills to like guys who are relevant. So you think an older player, I think George Washington, the first president. I didn't quite go that early in time, Marcus, but more a guy who's just more recognizable. The founder of our country in George Washington, I think is comparison almost to Mr. Hockey himself. I had Gordie Howe on the $1 bill.
Okay.
I thought it made sense. Longevity. He did a lot of great things for the game. One of the most recognizable faces of the game. I was debating between him or maybe like a Jean Bellevue or something like that, like one of those old Canadian players. I was really debating, but I decided to go with Gordie Howe on the $1 bill.
I went with Gretzky on the $1 bill. I think I was not thinking the longevity. I was more thinking
a different approach. Yeah,
I like it though. You're trying to because I did that in some ways. I think on the 1 you got to go with the guy who's the most famous. I love Abe. But I think Washington's the more famous president. The nation's capital is named after him, after all. So I went Gretzky. I think Gretz on the $1 bill, and I'm more than okay with that. Yeah, he'd be on the hockey $1 bill.
That's fine. I had Gretzky on my $5 bill. I had Gordie Howe.
Okay.
So it was those. I was interchangeable. The only reason I put Howe just because he was a little bit older. I thought it made more sense.
I put Mario Lemieux
on my 5.
I put Mario Lemieux on my 5. I was tempted to go Crosby, as the Lincoln to Washington transition, but I think Lemieux still scratches that itch. I put Mario Lemieux on my 5. A guy who is somehow underrated. How'd that happen?
Well, this is why I put Mario Lemieux on my $10 bill.
Okay.
Alexander Hamilton is the forgotten founding father.
Oh, another guy who's not another ex-president. Yeah, another guy who's not a president.
I have Mario Lemieux on my $10 bill because of the comparison to Hamilton. His career, like Hamilton's life, was cut short a little bit there, so I kind of made those comparisons. So I have Mario Lemieux on my $10 bill.
I'm going to put Howe on the 10 for similar reasons as the, quote unquote, forgotten. I don't think hockey fans forget him, but I think because of the passage of time, he's easy to get lost in history. So I put Mr. Hockey on the $10.
That's fair. That's fair. After this now, so now I'm making slight adjustments because 100 is not going to be a player anymore. So we have the 20, the 50, and the 100. The 20 then, well, give me your 20 first because I
put Haley Wickenheiser, arguably the greatest women's ice hockey player of all time. There was some discussion of putting Harriet Tubman on the $20 bill because of Andrew Jackson's problematic legacy. So in a reflection of Jackson's problematic legacy and going the opposite way, I decided to honor a pioneer in the women's game. She's in the Hockey Hall of Fame. She's a 4-time gold medalist, won tons of world championships. Give Haley Wickenheiser. Put her on our hockey $20 bill.
Right, sticking in that realm, then, if you're going to go different, I think that's a great pick. But if you're going to go revolutionize of the game, I'm going to take Bobby Orr on the $20 bill then.
Okay, I like it.
Bobby Orr on the 20. $50. So we got 2 more here. 50 and 100. So now I'm debating in my head who I'm going to flip because I had a couple guys here. I think for the 50. I would put one modern guy on this list. I think you kind of have to, just for the development of the game. And if I'm gonna go modern, I would coin flip. I want to put I would have put Jagr on the 100, frankly. But I had no.
You should be allowed to do that. You should be allowed to do that. You could put Jagr on the 100. I'm just saying with my thought process.
But but I also, just to piss off Cole, I don't want to put 3 Penguins on dollar bills because I was gonna put Crosby on one of them too. So Jagr will be on the silver dollar because he's timeless. So I'm gonna put Sidney Crosby on my $50 bill.
Same boat. How one of Lincoln's successors, not his immediate successor, in Grant, kind of carrying on the civil rights legacy and with some, radical legislation. It was Grant in that sense with Lincoln, much like Crosby's carrying on Lemieux's legacy. Lemieux, I think I have Lemieux on my Lemieux on my 5. Lemieux's career arguably cut short. Lincoln's presidency arguably cut short. Thinking of that, just remember that as well. Other than that, how was the play, Mrs. Lincoln? So yeah, I'm gonna do Sidney Crosby on the 50 as a modern recognizer.
Yeah, I think you got to have at least one there. I think I at least one. And then $100 bills. If we're gonna go a little bit off the beaten path, not necessarily player, I think you have to go Scotty Bowman on the $100 bill. Both as a coach of the Montreal Canadiens, both as a coach with the Detroit Red Wings and GM and all that stuff. Really kind of a pioneer as far as his visionaries in the hockey world. I think that would make most sense to put him on the $100 bill. If you're going to go someone not player-wise, I would go Scotty Bowman. I
like that pick. That's a really good pick. I'm going a little further off the beaten path in terms of coaches. I'm going Herb Brooks.
Herb Brooks would have been, if you're going to go American, he would have been my other pick. Herb Brooks there on the 100.
You're thinking cross hockey appeal, if a non-history buff could recognize Ben Franklin, would a non-hockey buff be able to recognize Herb Brooks? I would argue yes. It's had an indelible impact, in many ways positive, in many ways negative, and that the United States is currently stuck in 1980 when it comes to building a roster and competitive ice hockey tournaments. But that's we've done at least times.
That was like our
every time they just
show was that topic, like the original Puckleheads show.
One of the first Olympic shows was like, oh, they're bad. They're going to be bad. And then they lost, and we're like, oh, we were right. And then the World Cup, oh, they're going to be bad. And then, oh, look again. Look again. They were bad. So I'm going to go Herb on the hundo. I didn't think coins. I like Jagr on the silver dollar, though. He's got silver in the hair.
I was going to say, you could do the hair nicely, like, and chiseled into like a dollar, like a silver dollar, like 50 cent. You could have Jagr on one of the coins. I think you could probably get a goalie in there. You could probably get, Wah or Hajic, or maybe I think Jacques Plante would be cool on one. You could have him like with the mask or without the mask, like kind of cool. I think you can get something going with that. So I think it's a great question. And it doesn't surprise me that the guy as smart as Danny Cuneo came up with it, because it is a debate that you could have. You could apply that to everything. I mean, modern day politicians. You could apply it to any athletes. You could
arguably apply it to our current currency as well, and have truly examine who belongs on pieces of currency.
Oh, you easily could. That's the political Puckleheads. I'm trying to think of a quick pun for politics.
A good pun. Oh man, we'll have to come up with that. Then we'll start our politics themed podcast with even less listeners.
With even less.
We'll just have like the most obvious. We'll just have the most obvious takes. Like, oh, I don't know, like white supremacy's bad. That'll be our million. Just like
Marcus, and I'm not afraid to admit it.
Yeah, exactly. That's our world. That's going to be on our to be announced.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, got anything else before we send the fine people on their way?
No, I think this is a good show. We should let everybody know we're going to definitely be more active here in the next couple of weeks. Go division by division. Our previews. We'll talk. Any training camp news that might come out, but division predictions, the playoff and Stanley Cup predictions, which, if you guys know, is always accurate. Has never been wrong.
Never, not once.
We'll also predict some of the awards throughout the season, and then maybe one of the last shows, one of the biggest hot takes we can give before we start into the season here. But it's been good to get back. I felt good. It's like working our way back into it, Marcus. Hockey season, preseason starts next week. Preseason, I mean, I happen to enjoy preseason. I like to see some of the younger guys and see what's possible. And if you really still care for it, preseason nowadays has much better fights than the NHL regular season, so you can always check out those if you're interested.
But that's probably the worst part of preseason, the guys who are like, I need to make an impression and get on this team, so I'm going to take out somebody's knee. Yeah.
It was like, this is unnecessary. I don't really feel like this right now.
And this is dangerous for the sports long-term
culture,
really. And but that's a discussion for another time. We could rip on the NHL all we want, but we're in a positive mood because hockey's almost back. I'm sure they're going to do something though within the next couple of weeks to draw our ire again. But until then, for Conall McGillis, I'm Marcus White. And pleasant evening or whatever time.